Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Watership Down podcast. I've decided to go ahead with recording this episode on the same day as the introduction episode I've just uploaded. So, what am I going to do in this one? Well, when I looked at the book, I realised that my copy of Watership Down, which here it is, you might be able to hear it, wonderful old battered copy, doesn't even have the introduction in. I look inside it, and I've had this since I was a child. There's my Childish signature inside the front cover. It's wonderfully battered, and one day I might upload a picture of it. It's just quite a lovely old paperback. It's the only one I've ever read. I've read it repeatedly throughout my life. It's a wonderfully aged copy. It was printed in, it seems, well, the last year it's mentioned is 1978, so that's the same year that the first film came out. So I assume I got hold of this after seeing the film. I remember being traumatised by the first film, and I must have got this around the same time. So it's a mere 6 years after the book was published. So 1978, I was 11 then. Yeah, that helps you work out my age. And this copy was 90p. So yeah, the introduction. I decided I need to add this into the first episode where I'm actually going through the book, because the introduction is important. It makes some very things clear about how this book came about, and I'm going to combine this with the first chapter in the book as well. So this might be a longer episode than I expected. So I re-listened to the introduction on the audiobook just before this, and I've made some notes on that. And the first claim Richard Adams makes is that the entire book came out of car journeys where he was telling his daughter's stories. He's always said this. He said that it started as stories told in a car. I found that absolutely amazing if it's true, but the memory that involves. I mean, if the whole book, is he really saying the whole book was originally told in the car? Yeah, hats off to him if that's true, because I wouldn't be able to remember stories told in a car that well. But yeah, that's the mythos of Watership Down. That's where it originated from, when he was driving his daughters to and from school and round his two daughters. And eventually they said, you've got to write this down. This can't go to waste. He also, in the introduction, goes through the origins of characters, and a lot of them come from his wartime experience. It kind of explains why it's such... Well, maybe it explains. We'll go into this another time, maybe. If we take a feminist angle on the book, but it's basically a male book. It's very male, and the characters, yeah, I can imagine they are derived from people he met in wartime. For example, Kihar apparently is based on a Norwegian resistance fighter he met. So yeah, that kind of, I can imagine what kind of bloke he was. That's a whole subject in itself, Kihar. So his daughters urged him to write it down. And he did so, and he went through each section with them as he wrote it down, and ended up with a manuscript. And he says that his love of the countryside was going to be in the book. It was going to be the book was going to be imbued with the love of where he lived, and his love of that countryside is very obvious. I mean, it starts with description of nature, and they run all the way through it. They frame the book. I'll go into that more some other time, but he also explains lapine, the rabbit language, the why he thought he needed a rabbit language, and it's a good explanation. You know, in certain cultures, for example, around the world, you need words for things that aren't needed elsewhere. Well, rabbits, if they spoke, would need words for things, you know, such as sylflay, which means eating outdoors. Owsla, which is, I guess we do have words for an owsla, kind of a guard, the police, whatever, you know, the elite rabbits who keep discipline in a warren. We have words for that, so maybe owsla wasn't needed as much. But a word like sylflay, yes, you'd need a special word for that, because rabbits eat in a different way to humans. So it makes sense. It goes into the Arabic or influence of the language, which is actually obvious when you look at it. And how some of the words use onomatopoeia, so hrududu for car, you know, it sounds like a car's engine would to a rabbit. And also he wanted some words like Efrafa. Although it's such a negative place, the word is quite a fluffy word. Said he was trying to come up with the kind of words that rabbits might say if they could speak, which is odd because they can't. But yeah, okay, fair enough. I love Lapine. I love the words, and he immediately introduces those words throughout the book, and you learn you're instantly drawn into this culture because of these words. I think Lapine is very important in the book. So the draft for Watership Down was rejected 7 times apparently. The problem with it, and it is a real problem, is the theme of the book was too babyish, but the book was told using adult language. So adults wouldn't want to read it because it's babyish, and yes, a lot of people don't like Watership Down. Yes, that's their first reaction to it. Oh, it's about rabbits, that's babyish. But also it's written for adults, so children might not want to read it. This was apparently why it was rejected. Yeah, I can see that. Eventually Rex Collings, who's a small publisher, took it on. Adams actually found him. He saw something else he published that made him think he might be interested. And it was Rex Collings, apparently, who gave the book its title. Which surprises me. I mean, how did it get to that point without a title? I mean, did he have a working title? I'd love to know what the working titles were. Did it have a working title? To have a whole manuscript and not even have a working title, I can't believe that. I'd be fascinated to know what titles he thought of before that. Anyway, it was published, and it instantly became popular. He also makes clear in the introduction that it actually got popular in America first, so it arrived in the UK as a popular book via America, which is interesting. I hadn't known that before. And there was a deluxe illustrated version that appeared in 1976. I didn't know that. I'm really curious to see that. Maybe I have seen it. I do not remember ever having seen that, but I'd be fascinated to see that. The book's never been out of print, which is understandable. Never been out of print since then. And by the list of reprintings in my copy, I mean, it must be a hell of a lot longer by now. But yeah, in my copy it says, if I just go back to where, first published 1972 by Rex Collings, then published in Puffin by 73, then Penguin edition 74. So Puffin, I think that was a children's publisher, so it first published by the children's arm of Penguin, it looks like. Reprinted 1975 4 times, 1976 3 times, 1977 3 times, and then my edition 1978, and obviously a lot more since then. He says he didn't understand the popularity of the book. He didn't get why it got so popular. Yeah, well, modesty, yeah, that's good. And he also said it was never meant to be an allegory. Now, I'm sceptical there. I must admit, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, yeah, there's a lot of allegory in this book. And I can't help thinking that maybe Richard Adams just didn't want to get drawn into those discussions. I mean, Efrafa, you know, it's so allegorical, clearly. But then again, maybe I'm just imposing meaning on it. But he said it was just a story about rabbits told in a car. Oh, to have been able to listen in to those original tellings of the story. That would have been fascinating. So, chapter 1. Well, I opened the book. Like I say, I don't have the introduction, so I go past the list of chapters and the map that just draws your eyes into all these places in the book that you don't yet know about if you haven't read it before. And we get to part 1, the journey. Chapter 1 of part 1, the notice board. And he starts off immediately with a quote from Agamemnon involving Cassandra, who Fiver, I now learn, was based on. The oracle who gives predictions of terrible events in the future and nobody believes her. So that's quite appropriate, I suppose. And it starts with this wonderful phrase, and I'm not going to quote from the book a lot, I'm trying to deliberately avoid that, but this phrase, the primroses were over. Because the book ends with, and this is what I mean by framing of nature, the last line of the book is, where the first primroses were beginning to bloom. So the book is literally framed, beginning and end, by nature, which is beautiful. And the book starts by just describing the world we live in, the world where rabbits don't speak. It's a human description of nature. We're led in to this warren, and it's just described, and no rabbits talk at first. It describes the May sunset. It was and the details of birds singing, and it says the warren was at peace. It's a good, nice, gentle introduction, beautifully written. And then it focuses in. It's quite cinematic, really. It focuses on this group of holes, almost hidden away. And two rabbits are sitting together side by side. Still, they haven't spoken yet. It's this normal scene, just been described. And the rabbits are described that one is larger than the other. And Fiver is made clearly is a yearling. So this is a strange thing where you've got a world where rabbits talk and are adults, because these are adult rabbits, but he's a year old. It's rabbits don't live long, 2-3 years. So, they become adults quickly, I guess. And although he's small, he's not an outskirter. He's not a rabbit from outside, who's living on the edge of the warren, having a hard life. And that's because of his brother, I guess, who looks after him. So, of course, the little rabbit is Fiver, and the larger rabbit is Hazel. Not as large as the biggest rabbits. And Fiver's not quite happy. He's not happy about something. There's something not quite right. He can't put his finger on it. And the first rabbits that speak aren't Hazel and Fiver. They're other rabbits who notice them. The first spoken line in the book is, "Oh, it's only Fiver," I think, I'm right in saying. So it's just describing the rabbits from the point of view of another two rabbits. And we have their conversation. I guess it's a clever way of actually explaining who they are, these two rabbits, the two of the main characters in the book. And at the bottom of this page is the first footnote. There are a lot of footnotes, first chapter, a lot of footnotes. He kind of tried to avoid it later on, but yeah, a lot of explanation needed. So, for example, it's explained to us the word chre. Rabbits can only count up to 4. Any number over 4 is chre. Now, considering how sophisticated they speak, okay, we'll accept that. They can't imagine any number above, because they can't say any number above 4. Okay, we'll go for that, but yeah. So, yeah. So the 1,000 is uchre. Well, because, of course, the 1,000 enemies of rabbits that we learn about later, they are... I guess it's a bit of a contradiction to say that this word means the 1,000 if they can't say anything above 4, but okay. And also, there's the footnote then goes on the page opposite to say about the Owsla, explains the Owsla, what the Owsla is, and how they vary, how they can be more or less authoritarian. Basically, the Owsla is a group of rabbits that help run the place, that keep disciplined, or just keep the place in order, keep the place running well, and help the chief rabbit to come with the smooth running of the place. And Owslas can vary, as we learn in this book. Now, this warren, which is the Sandleford Warren, hasn't yet been named in the book. I can't remember it's first named, but the Owsla is a little bit authoritarian. The first conversation Hazel and Fiver have, Fiver's saying that something's not quite right, and Hazel tries to take his mind off it and says, right, find me a cowslip. And they find one, and cowslips are apparently delicious, and there aren't many left at that time of year in late May. And as soon as they go to eat it, two of the Owsla come up and say, right, leave it alone. That's ours. That's for us only. So, yeah. Petty, small-minded mindset. We get to know straight away why someone might want to not be at this warren anymore. And I know Hazel, before the events of later in the chapter, actually says sometimes I feel like clearing out. Clearly, the Owsla here can be not very pleasant. I mean, it's so petty to kind of say, no, you can't eat that. That's for us only. What stupid rules. So they're warned off and basically threatened with violence if they don't understand the rules by Toadflax. Lovely names, by the way, all the way they're all named after flowers and so on. So they move away from the cowslip and try and enjoy the evening, and Hazel and then go up to the edge of the field and they bump into something that we would know what it is. A notice board. And this really dates it as well. This is set in the early 70s, late 60s, because inevitably, where there's a notice board which has just been put up, there is also a cigarette lying on the ground, So that's one of the main features of people. People smoke. Every human being seems to smoke, because one of the main things the rabbits associate with human beings is the white sticks sticking out of their mouths. How times change, eh? And that's where Fiver realises, hold on, no. Okay, I know now why I'm feeling nervous. He gets absolutely hysterical. The sun is setting and he looks across at the fields, and okay, with the sun setting, they might turn a darker colour, but to Fiver, they're covered in blood. And he is terrified and suddenly knows that a bad, bad thing is coming to the Warren. Now Hazel has to take charge of him and get him back to the Warren, but Fiver is very reluctant to go back to the Warren. And at this point, you don't know, ignoring the fact that rabbits speak in this book, at this point, we don't know whether or not the supernatural exists in this book, quite aside from rabbits talking. Well, it does. We'll later learn, yes, it does exist. In this book, the supernatural, whatever you think of the supernatural and psychic powers and so on, in this book, they exist. But at this point, he's just a hysterical small rabbit who suddenly said something bad is going to happen, could easily be dismissed. But earlier on, Hazel says to him, look, let's go and eat over there, if you think that's okay. So Hazel's obviously in the habit of checking things with Fiver, so it indicates that he's been right about things in the past. And then, of course, as they leave, there's a lovely description of the sunset and the wind turning colder. And then, very rarely, we see in this book, I mean, there's not the illustrated version, but the words of the notice board appear in a box. And the wording really tells you that this is not set nowadays. This is so set a few decades ago. Ideally situated estate. It's the wording is very old-fashioned for our times. But this notice board, of course, is a notice board that people have put up because they're intending to build an estate where the Warren is. And that's how the chapter ends. That where these rabbits are living, in this apparently peaceful Warren, human beings are going to be building houses there. And for rabbits, that's only going to end one way. Join me for the next episode where Hazel and Fiver attempt to persuade the chief rabbit that something terrible is going to happen to the Warren. Do you think they convince him? Let's wait and see.